And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, high atop the Edwards Plateau.
Harvest is over.
Harvest is over. That's right.
Man.
So we pulled in 5 tons.
5.5.
5.5 tons of grapes, hand harvested over the past 2 weeks.
4.4 of those tons in 2 days.
Yeah.
And it was.
Picked them and processed them and got them into the winery and got all the tests done and got the
all the additions.
All the additions. Had to add a little acid to some of them. It's citric acid.
No, tartaric. Yeah.
Tartaric acid. Right.
Which is a natural acid in the grapes.
Right.
So we're just.
So there's a reason we do that, right? The acidity is important for longevity.
Yeah. Well, it's the pH. So yeah, I mean you can say acidity, but you can have high acidity and still have high pH.
Yeah.
So
they're not directly connected.
Yeah, which
even
is
though
weird.
It seems like they should be. Yeah.
Well, the pH can be buffered by things like potassium. So you can have a high pH, and you don't really know if you say you figure, well, I can add, 1 gram per liter tartaric acid to this whole vat, and maybe it'll lower the pH, right?
Right.
Maybe it will barely lower the pH.
Barely lower it, yeah.
So you do a bench trial and see what kind of results you get, because if there's a lot of potassium in the must, the grape juice, it may barely bring the pH down.
Yeah.
But the acidity level goes up, and you can measure that with the titration. So you do both of those tests on your bench trial, and we found out that the pH came down significantly. So we made our additions, brought that pH down, and that's what helps preserve it in the long run.
In the long run, yeah. And then so after we did that, you mix it up good, and then we did yeast additions.
Yeah.
And so you calculate how much yeast you need to add, and we get this particular kind. There's a whole bunch you can get.
Oh, God, there's
so many.
It's like...
But some of them smell like lovely, like bread, and some of them smell like forts. So we like the bread kind.
Yep. We tried a couple of different ones this season, and they were both pretty good. They both smell good.
Yep, so they're boiling away.
We tried one last year that was like, woo, what does that do? But it made great wine.
It did. But
which is strange, because that smell eventually goes away, and maybe it's... Right now, we're experimenting with the smells we like.
Yeah,
Maybe later we'll experiment with the ones we don't like.
That's right.
Let's see what kind of wine that makes.
So we were in the winery today, and we've got 5 vats. And they're basically big bins, and when you're doing the primary fermentation, it's open. Really big wineries use closed. They have
both.
Yeah, they have both, but they've got these gigantic. They look like enormous barrels, basically. But we're doing them in these open-topped bins, and that's important because the wine is once it's fermenting, it's outgassing a lot of CO2, and there's alcohol fumes and everything coming out of there, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Lots of very interesting smells. But we go into the winery we're using right now is a building that isn't really built to be a winery. So Kyle and I go in there, and we've got all these tons of grapes fermenting in there, and they're basically boiling CO2. And as soon as you walk in, you can tell that it's hard to breathe.
Yeah. And then you have to punch down the cap, which is all the bubbling of the CO2 pushes all the grape solids up to the top and forms this thick, hard layer of grape
material.
Mass. Yeah.
That's hard enough to where you can smack it with your hand and it doesn't break it. You won't get through the liquid. They're pretty tough.
Then one of them, it takes like almost all your weight to push the first hole in it. Once you push down that first cap into the liquid, then you can start breaking away the edges.
Right. So it's hard to do because we were doing it manually. And you're in there and you can't breathe. So both of us were taking turns and having to run outside to get our breath. What were you saying? You were like, I can't tell if I'm lightheaded, which probably means I'm fucking lightheaded, so I need to go outside.
If you're not sure if you're lightheaded, you're probably lightheaded.
You're probably lightheaded.
You should go outside and get some fresh air.
Get fresh air. So yeah, it's always interesting. It's a learning process. We've never done this much before. We have now for 2 years made wines.
Yeah, this is 10 times the amount we made last year.
Yeah. And it's all our grapes, which is really fantastic. Right? Last year we bought grapes.
No, this is 5. Is this 5 times what we did last year?
Math is hard.
Yeah. 5 times what we did last year.
But that's because we bought grapes, right?
Yeah, we bought them.
So this time we're doing 5 times what we had last year, but it's all ours.
Yeah.
We grew all of it ourselves. So it's really...
it's like quite an achievement.
Yeah, it's fulfilling to see all these grapevines that we have like nursed since they were babies to be basically full-grown producing adults, adult vines that are... And I mean, we had the hail damage. Some of you might remember earlier in the year, there was a really bad hailstorm that came through on a night we were trying to podcast live. And
Epic fail.
Epic fail because we lost power or we lost internet. But the other thing we lost that day was a lot of grapes because the grapes were already on the vines and the hail came through and decimated a lot of it. So we weren't even sure what we were going to get this year. And it turns out that we got more than we thought we were going to get. And I can't imagine how much we would have gotten if that hail hadn't. I mean, it would have been, who knows? So really, really, really fun stuff.
Yep, and it was quite a bit more, and what we had planned for was doing a little bit of our own and then buying grapes from the high plains in Texas, which ripen much later. So I was thinking we'll be fermenting roughly 3 tons of grapes at one time, or close within a couple of weeks. So maybe even less, maybe just 1 ton at a time, and then we can buy from the high plains a couple of tons and do those at one time. So it turns out that we fermented it like a ton and a quarter.
Yeah, where you pick one variety and
and now we're fermenting 4.5 tons at the same time. And it's like the whole winery is packed full of these things, and I'm like, I have nowhere to put all this juice when we're done.
Yeah,
so we got to go buy tanks. So that's the next thing.
Yep.
I was
and we got to make sure our barrels show up.
Making phone calls trying to find some tanks.
Yeah. And of course, nobody wants to get rid of any tanks right now because they're all also bringing in all their wine.
Yeah. But I might have found a source. So
okay.
We'll see. Good. Slate Mill.
I was hoping we weren't going to have to use like a septic or something. No. Let's just empty out that septic tank and we'll put it in there for now.
God. Nobody's going to buy our wine.
I know. It was a joke, people. We would never do that. All right. Time for space weather news. From spaceweather.com. We had a near miss, and we are approaching the god of war.
Oh.
That's right. CME misses Earth. There is still no sign of a CME expected to hit Earth today. It probably missed. The CME did hit NASA's Stereo A spacecraft. The geometry of the Stereo A impact suggests that the storm cloud sailed wide of our planet, so maybe next time. So yeah, people were wondering if that CME was going to hit us. It was pretty close, but it seems to have missed. And also, we are approaching Mars. So by the time you finish reading this sentence, you'll be 40 kilometers closer to the planet Mars. Earth and Mars are converging for a close encounter this fall, and their separation is rapidly shrinking, -8 kilometers per second as of August 20th. You are literally approaching the red planet. Just this week, the brightness of Mars surpassed that of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, and suddenly Mars is almost bright enough to see in the daylight and an easy target for backyard telescopes. And the best is yet to come. By the night of the closest approach on October 6th, Mars will more than double in brightness again, outshining everything in the night sky except Venus and the moon. Can't wait? Right now, a good time to look is just before daybreak. Mars is high in the southern sky, and its burnt orange hue looks beautiful when surrounded by the day's first hint of morning blue. And congratulations, you're now almost 500 kilometers closer to Mars.
That's cool.
So, current conditions. Let me zoom in here. Solar wind speed is 304.7 kilometers per second, and the density is 7.7 protons per cubic centimeter. Sunspot number right now is 15. So obviously we are on a 0 spotless day stretch.
Yeah.
And the total percentage of 2020 spotless days is 67%. Still dropping fast. And the neutron counts today is rated as high at 9.4% plus above the space age average.
All right, I'm waiting for that neutron count to start coming down.
Yeah.
We almost got nailed.
Yep. And
still
not coming down. I don't know.
No.
So that maybe that we have sunspots, but they're not powerful enough yet to really start blocking the
Maybe so.
cosmic rays.
We're going to roll with that theory.
Mystery solved, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. All right. And this is from our good buddy Phil Plate at Bad Astronomy. The fastest star in the galaxy has been found. Well, at least the fastest one we found has been found.
Come on, Scarptard.
While peering deep into the heart of the galaxy, astronomers have found the fastest star ever seen. This thing is tearing through space. At one point in its orbit, it's moving at a terrifying 24,000 kilometers per second.
Whoa.
Over 85 million kilometers per hour. That's 8% the speed of light.
Man, that's relativistic. Holy crap.
Yeah, and he says, holy relativistic acceleration. How can any star be screaming through space that quickly? Well,
Circling a black hole.
it helps to plunge down to within 1.9 billion kilometers of a supermassive black hole.
Yeah.
So there is a story here. In the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, is an enormous black hole with a mass of 4 million times that of the sun. All big galaxies have one. This black hole, called Sagittarius A, isn't alone. Surrounding it are a variety of objects, including dozens of massive stars. These orbit the black hole pretty close in, and the enormous gravity of the black hole swings them around at fiercely high velocity. They move so rapidly that changes in their positions can be seen over a matter of mere months.
Wow.
Not that it's easy to see. We're about 27,000 light years from the Milky Way's center. So even though these stars are luminous, distance reduces their brightness. Also, there's a lot of dust between us and the galactic center, making them even tougher to observe. One way to get around that is to look in infrared light, which pierces the dust better than optical light, the kind that we see. It also helps if you're using one of the enormous, very large telescope, 8.2-meter behemoths in Chile. Using a pair of extremely sensitive and sharp-eyed cameras called Sinfani and NACO, astronomers have been mapping these stars for many years. One in particular, called S2, has an orbit so close in and so well determined that it was used to measure the mass of the black hole in the first place. But several stars have now been spotted on even tighter orbits. One, S62, recently passed very close to the black hole, less than 3 billion kilometers, closer than Neptune is to the sun, producing all sorts of fun observations in science. For comparison, the black hole itself is about 24 million kilometers across. In the new paper, astronomers announce a recently discovered star called S4714. Its orbit is similar to S62's, highly elliptical and dropping down extremely close to the black hole. But it gets even closer than S62, coming within about 1.9 billion kilometers. That's closer than Uranus is to the sun. When S62 flies past the black hole, it moves at about 6.7% the speed of light.
Wow.
But S4714 has it beat, just absolutely cannonballing past Sagittarius A at 8% light speed. So it's fast enough to cross the continental United States in a fifth of a second. Fast enough to get from Earth to the moon in about 16 seconds. It took the Apollo spacecraft more than 3 days to get that far. The Parker Solar Probe, when it's closest to the sun, moves at over 100 kilometers per second.
Sun probe.
That's right, Sun Probe. The fastest spacecraft ever. This star is moving well over 200 times faster. This is more than just a cool record. For one thing, that close to the black hole relativity rears its head. There's an effect called frame dragging that shifts the orientation of the orbit, causing it to rotate. The orbits of these stars have been seen to do this, which helps us better understand relativistic effects of the black hole on nearby space.
Frame dragging.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so your orbit, I just, the way I imagine in my head is like you can imagine this ellipse with the black hole, and that whole ellipse is rotating around it.
Yeah, it's
Frame dragging.
Yeah.
Good band name.
Yeah.
Let's see. S4714 is so close to Sagittarius A and so faint that even the world's biggest infrared telescopes have had a hard time picking it out of the crowd of stars on that spot in the sky. Still, it implies that there may be stars even closer, perhaps just less massive and too faint to spot. There's a limit to how close they can get, though, without getting torn apart. It'll be interesting to find out just how close these stars get. Hopefully, future gigantic telescopes will have an even better view. I remember, Phil Plate says, when the first stars were seen close into the black hole, and how their movement was used to measure its mass and our distance from it. It wasn't that long ago, but we've still come a long way since. It makes me wonder what else we'll see in this curious menagerie, and what records will be broken next.
Yeah, I was gonna wonder if getting that close to the black hole, if it loses material, Yeah,
I bet.
I think one of the coolest things, I've always thought of. I read so much sci-fi, so I've always thought, like, what would if I had a freaking ship where I could just jump in and it could go warp speed to whatever. What would I want to go look at? And I think one of the systems where you have a black hole or a small black hole or a neutron star or whatever, and then there's a big star, burning star orbiting it, but close enough to where it's pulling material off that star into a spiral into the black hole. It would just be cool. Awesome.
Let's go check that out.
Yeah.
For sure. So I want to point out that the Sagittarius A, which is, it's abbreviated in the story, capital S, lowercase gr dot A, which is the galactic center, can be seen in the sky right now. If you're in the northern hemisphere, it's in the to the south in the southern sky, and the way I recognize it is a teapot.
Southern sky in the evening, right?
Yeah, in the evening. Yeah. The way I recognize it is a teapot shape of bright stars, and the teapot is sort of tilted like it's pouring tea. It's a little sort of almost like an A shape with a handle on the left side and a spout on the right. So you can look up that on Google and see the teapot of Sagittarius. And right at the spout of that teapot that's where the galactic center is, like right in front of it, sort of between that spout and Scorpio. So there's some.
Yeah, and I think if you are in a place where you can kind of pick out the Milky Way, you'll see what he's talking about. You can tell that there's kind of a dark area there, right?
Yeah, there is definitely a dark
void.
patch.
Yeah, dark patch. Yeah.
I mean,
the Milky Way. Yeah, we've talked about. Kyle and I were talking about this. I think last podcast night we were hanging out afterwards outside looking at the stars, and the Milky Way has a definite dark line going down the middle of it when you're looking at it in the sky. Yeah. Right, and that's supposedly. That's the galactic disk of dust.
Yeah.
So since we're so far out on the edge of the galactic disk, when we look in towards the galaxy, that disk of dust is actually blocking the light from the visible light. Like Phil said in that article, you can see it with infrared or radio waves, but the visible light is blocked by that dust, so it appears to us as this dark band going through the center of the Milky Way. But there's a part where that dark band widens. This is how I've always looked at it. The dark band seems to widen out, and there's kind of a weird discontinuity in the whole structure, and that's where the galactic center is.
Yeah, and the other problem is that area right now at this time of year is low in the sky.
Yeah.
So you're only looking at half of the Milky Way.
Yeah.
When you're looking in, you're seeing like the center is pretty low in the sky, and of course the lower you get, the more atmosphere you're looking through.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's hard to make out, like if you could back away from the whole system and look at the galaxy on the, from its edge in, you might see this sort of sandwich, right? There's bright stars above. There's this dark line in the middle that kind of gets fatter towards the middle and thinner out towards the edges, and then a bright band below. But of course,
it's a reverse Oreo.
Yeah, exactly. Reverse Oreo. We can only see half of it, or at least I can from where I am. Looking down, I see where Sagittarius is, fairly low right now at this time of year. And so it's not obvious.
It's not immediately obvious, yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, this is kind of an aside, but I always wonder there's a little tongue of stuff sticking off, of bright stuff sticking off above. And is that like one of the far arms? Am I looking at
Yeah, I know, right.
It's hard for me to figure out what that is with the perspective problem.
I think most likely it's a problem of where the dust patches are. There can be
you're probably right.
More dust in certain places and closer nebula to us.
No, man. It's the arm on the other side.
That would be cool. That would be really cool. But yeah, Russ blew my mind too when we were talking about that, because I'm like, how can I see these other stars over here and this and that? And he was like, wait, no. Every star that you can see with the naked eye is in our galaxy.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? I don't. How did I go this long without knowing that?
Yeah. You were asking how come you can see the stars in front of the Milky Way, and I'm like, because it's in the back. That's I was like, the Milky Way is in the very back of everything we can see.
Because you can see some bright stars in that dark rift.
Right. Yeah. They're definitely close to us.
Yeah, they're really close. And then of course the stars that are nowhere near the Milky Way galaxy or the Milky Way line in the sky are still in the Milky Way.
Are still in our galaxy.
That's what blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute.
How is this happening? Yeah, it's perspective.
I feel really dumb right now. How did I not know that?
Yeah, I think we looked it up, and it was like the most distant star you can see with the naked eye is 4,000 light years away, right?
Which is
nothing. Yeah,
nothing.
The Milky Way is 100,000 light years across, estimated. So
we're 27,000 light years from the center.
Yeah.
Every star you see up there, folks, is in our galaxy. Blew my mind.
All right. I got another quick story here. This is from Live Science, livescience.com. It's interstellar visitor Oumuamua could still be alien technology. New study hints.
All right.
And the subtext is aliens or a chunk of solid hydrogen? Which idea makes less sense? ? Oumuamua, a mysterious interstellar object that crashed through our solar system 2 years ago, might in fact be alien technology. That's because an alternative non-alien explanation might be fatally flawed, as a new study argues.
All right.
But most scientists think the idea that we spotted alien technology in our solar system is a long shot. In 2018, our solar system ran into an object lost in interstellar space. The object, dubbed Oumuamua, seemed to be long and thin, cigar-shaped, and tumbling end over end. Then close observations showed it was accelerating, as if something were pushing on it, and scientists still aren't sure why. One explanation, the object was propelled by an alien machine, such as a light sail, a wide, millimeter-thin machine that accelerates as it's pushed by solar radiation. The main proponent of this argument was Avi Loeb, a Harvard University astrophysicist. Most scientists, however, think Oumuamua's wonky acceleration was likely due to a natural phenomenon. In June, a research team proposed that solid hydrogen was blasting invisibly off the interstellar object's surface and causing it to speed up. Sorry, this website is really messing with me. Okay, so now in a new paper published Monday, or August 17th, in the Astrophysical Journal Letters, Loeb and Tiem Hoang, an astrophysicist at the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute, I probably really butchered that name, argued that the hydrogen hypothesis couldn't work in the real world, which would mean that there is still hope that our neck of space was once visited by advanced aliens, and that we actually spotted their presence at the time. Here's the problem with Oumuamua. It moved like a comet, but it didn't have the classic coma or tail of a comet. said astrophysicist Daryl Seligman, an author of the solid hydrogen hypothesis, who is starting a postdoctoral fellowship at in astrophysics at the University of Chicago. Oumuamua was the first object ever seen flying into our solar system and back out again. That's opposed to most solar system objects that turn circles around the sun, never leaving this celestial neighborhood. Oumuamua's journey and the fact that it was accelerating suggested that Oumuamua, which is estimated to be about 1,300 to 2,600 feet long, was a comet. And that would be 400 to 800 meters for you metrics out there. And yet, there was no coma or outgassing detected that was coming from the object. Normally, comets come from regions more distant from the sun than asteroids, and ice on their surface turns straight into gas as they approach the sun, leaving behind a trail of gas, or what we see as a beautiful comet tail. That outgassing changes how the comet moves through space. It's a bit like a very slow rocket engine. The sun strikes the comet, the warmest part of the comet bursts with gas, and that gas flowing away from the comet sends it tumbling faster and faster away from the sun.
Yeah.
In a paper published on June 9th, Seligman and Yale astrophysicist Gregory Laughlin proposed that the object was a comet made up partly or entirely of molecular hydrogen, lightweight molecules. H2 gas freezes into a puffy, low-density solid only when it's very cold, minus 434.45 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's pretty cold.
Which would be minus 259.14 degrees Celsius, or 14 degrees above absolute zero.
How long does it take to cool down your beer at that temp?
Researchers had already proposed the existence of hydrogen icebergs out in the very cold reaches of space. Laughlin and Seligman wrote in the study. An outgassing hydrogen wouldn't be visible from Earth, meaning it wouldn't leave behind a visible tail. The numbers worked out neatly. While a few other substances like solid neon could potentially explain the coma-free acceleration, hydrogen was the best match for the data. But in their new paper, Huang and Loeb respond to this idea and argue that the hydrogen iceberg explanation has a basic problem. Comets form when icy grains of dust bump into each other in space and form clumps, and then those clumps attract more dust and other clumps. And comets are like snowmen. They survive only as long as they don't melt. The stickiness that helps form comets is similar to the stickiness of ice cubes coming straight out of a cold freezer. But if you leave an ice cube on the counter for a minute or two and let its surface warm up, it won't feel sticky anymore. A thin film of liquid water on its surface makes it slippery. Huang and Loeb argued that even starlight in the coldest parts of space would warm up small chunks of solid hydrogen before they could clump together and form a comet of Oumuamua's large scale.
Aha.
And more importantly, the trek from the nearest giant molecular cloud, a dusty, gassy region of space where hydrogen icebergs are thought to form, is far too long. A hydrogen iceberg traveling hundreds of millions of years through interstellar space would have fallen apart, cooked by distant starlight.
Wow.
Seligman said that Loeb's analysis was correct, that no hydrogen comet would survive such a long trip. Hydrogen icebergs don't live that long in the galaxy, he said, and you definitely don't have time to get all the way from the nearest giant molecular cloud. So the theory only works if Oumuamua is just 40 million years old, he said. Over that time frame, outgassing could have molded the comet's oblong shape without destroying it entirely. So he pointed to a paper published in April in the Astronomical Journal, which proposed a number of nearby origin points for Oumuamua. The paper's authors didn't nail down the comet's home entirely, which would be impossible, they said. Oumuamua was hardly moving when it arrived in our sun's gravity well, which makes tracking the comet through space tricky. But the researchers looked at what else passed through the Milky Way neighborhood that our sun is now passing through in recent cosmic history. They landed on two groups of young stars, the Carina and Columba moving groups, said Tim Halat, a graduate student and astrophysicist at McGill University in Montreal, and lead author of the paper published in April. These all formed around 30 million to 45 million years ago in a cloud of gas that then dispersed. That small, dissipated cloud of molecular gas with just a few young stars is one where hydrogen icebergs might form, they said. There are many processes that can eject Oumuamua-type objects from young stars and moving groups, like gravitational nudges between stars in the group, or planet formation, or, as Seligman and Laughlin in 2020 argue, the molecular clouds that create the stars in the first place. All three papers fit neatly together if you assume Oumuamua was a hydrogen iceberg that originated in Carina or Columbia. But Seligman and Laughlin's idea could work here because H2 objects should have a short lifetime in the galaxy, and an origin in Carina or Columbia would make it young enough to survive the journey. But Loeb disagrees. Shortening the distance that H2 iceberg needs to travel does not solve the problems we outline in our paper, because the H2 iceberg would have formed when its parent planetary system formed billions of years ago. And in those eons, it would have evaporated. So there's a big fight over this whole thing. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
These guys are like, no, man, it was a spaceship. You know? So let's see. Loeb also said that hydrogen icebergs are expected to come from giant molecular clouds, not parts of space like Carina or Columba. And he reiterated that no hydrogen iceberg could survive the trek from the nearest giant molecular cloud. But asked if there is a clear leading candidate explanation for Oumuamua's acceleration, Loeb referred Live Science to a not yet released book he authored called Extraterrestrial, the First Sign of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth, which is due for publication in January.
All right.
So we talked a little bit about this on the Discord, discussing this possibility, and I really like the idea of it being some kind of probe. You know, the acceleration as it left the solar system was weird, but it was tiny. I mean, it really was small. So I don't think that, you know, these guys are like, oh yeah, it's some hyper advanced. No, if it was, first of all, it was tumbling like crazy in all three axes. Mm-hmm. So maybe it was malfunctioning. If it was a machine, right? Something's wrong with it. Or else I just don't know how it's supposed to work.
Well, the tumbling, I mean, how do you get acceleration in one direction?
Yeah, and a single axis if you're tumbling.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense for the comet question either. Right? Like if it's outgassing in random parts, the acceleration, it works the same as a rocket, right? So how... it seems like outgassing can't really explain.
Well, unless it's because if it was, I don't know. If it was hydrogen, like solid hydrogen, like within just the moment of exposure to the closeness of the star,
yeah,
it would just outgas in that area. And then once it goes on, you know,
onto the cold side, it's and then there's a lot more outgassing on the side that's facing the sun again. Like, I mean, if distant stars can evaporate that. Yeah. It seems like it should have lost all of its hydrogen as soon as it started getting close to the sun, because it's no longer. I mean, you know, it came within 0.16 AU of Earth.
No.
That's the thing that I was noticing about that. I was looking this stuff up, and I'm like, okay.
That's really close.
If it was a probe, I mean, it freaking did its job. It looked at the most interesting planet in this solar system. It came closer to Earth than anything else. Practically. I mean, I couldn't confirm that, but 0.16 AU is really close.
Yeah.
In terms of the solar system scale. So I wonder if it, did it get close to any of the other planets? I don't know, but that's really close to Earth, and we didn't notice it till it was way past us. But they backtracked its orbit, and they were like, holy crap, it came within, 0.16. So an AU is 93 million miles. So about 16% of that. That's damn close.
Maybe it has some weird tumble engine. It was cruising real stable when it was here taking pictures. And after it got past, it's like, engage engines. And it starts flipping
all over the place. Yeah. And
who knows?
Their range of size is like from roughly around 300 or 400 feet long to 3,000 feet.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It was so dim and small that they had, the way that they were guessing how big it was based on the fact that it was tumbling, and they were looking at the changing in light.
Uh-huh.
And so we don't even really know what it... I looked at pictures that they had taken of optical images, and it's just a little tiny dot in the middle of all these streaks because they were trying to track it. So all the background stars are streaks because it's moving fast. And it's just this little dot. So, like, we don't, all the pictures you see, they show you this long, like, sliver of, a crystal spaceship in the sky or whatever. And I'm like, we don't know what it looked like. We have no idea.
That's crazy.
It could have been a regular, much more regular object with vastly different albedo on its surface. Yeah. So as it was spinning, it was real bright here and then real dim, and that made it look like it was a long, thin object that was tumbling. I mean, we just don't know what it looked like, really.
Huh. That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It reminded me, and I know people have made this reference, but it reminded me of Rendezvous with Rama, you know?
Yeah.
It was the same thing. This long, narrow object comes in, and they notice that at first they think that it's a natural object because it keeps getting dimmer and brighter and dimmer and brighter. And they're thinking, all right, it's a regular asteroid. But when they eventually go meet it, and they eventually decide to go meet it because it starts slowing down. See, Oumuamua was accelerating as it was leaving, but Rama in the book begins to slow down on the way in. Mm-hmm. And that's when they were like, all right, we got to go look at this. And they find out that the reason it was getting brighter and dimmer because Rama's a long metal cylinder and had a big stain on one side, like it had run into something.
Oh, yeah. Looked like it was flipping over. But it was spinning because it was creating
it's rotating along its long
force,
axis to create gravity on the interior, but there was this big splash stain on the outside, and that made it get brighter and dimmer, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
Anyway, cool stuff. I think it's a spaceship. It was the crystal spaceship guys coming back to check, you know, come on. It's just a long crystal, dude.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Cigar crystals.
Yeah. All right. We have a great guest this week, thanks to Brandon, History Shift. And we've already interviewed her. This is on these time travel things. We're always doing this time travel stuff with the guests. But yeah, it was a great interview. So I want you guys to get her book. It's called Mysterious Stone Sights by Linda Zimmermann. So here is our interview with Linda. We are joined by Linda Zimmermann, author of Mysterious Stone Sights in the Hudson Valley of New York and northern New Jersey. So this is a topic that we discussed quite a bit last week with Glenn, and now we're continuing the subject with Linda. So Linda, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and we want to give a shout out to Brandon, History Shift, who connected us. He listened to the last week's show and he was like, "Oh, you got to talk to Linda." So we're definitely excited to hear your take on some of these sites. So let us know. First, let's hear about how you got interested in this subject. What was your path?
Well, I was my career was as a research scientist for a medical diagnostics company, but I love to write. So I was writing about all types of things in the Hudson Valley area of New York where I lived. And people I gravitate to the strange. So people would come up to me and tell me their stories about these stone sites, specifically these stone chambers. Now, I grew up on the west side of the Hudson River, where we don't have a single chamber. Yet you go to the east side in specifically Putnam, Dutchess, Westchester counties, and there are hundreds of them. And I'm like, wait a minute. I grew up in this region. How did we never hear of these? And of course, the conventional wisdom, and I use that term loosely, was they're all colonial root cellars, so there's nothing to pay attention to here. And it just didn't make sense. So that's what caught my curiosity.
Yeah, we haven't been in the area you're talking about, but we have been to Vermont, and there's a lot of these kinds of structures up in Vermont, and we've looked at some of them, and you're right, they don't make sense as root cellars, especially like a couple of the ones we went to look at, there was no apparent homestead anywhere nearby. And I mean, you'd think a root cellar you'd want to kind of have it near your house or something, right?
That you took the words right out of my mouth. I'm standing there looking at this elaborate chamber with enormous roof slabs.
Yes.
I mean, unbelievably heavy. Took a lot of muscle power. and just sophistication with these corbelled walls. They come inward, and I'm looking around, and I'm going in these increasingly wide circles. Where's the house?
Right.
Where's the barn?
Yep.
If there's 3 feet of snow on the ground, am I going to want to walk 400 feet to get to my potatoes?
Right.
Didn't make sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't gone to any of these in the snow. I imagine that would be tough. Some of the ones we looked at were basically on the sides of mountains, so it was, it would be tough to hike in that area. It was tough to hike in that area even without snow. So I'd imagine you'd want it close to your house if it was really a root cellar.
Right, and the side of the mountain brings up. We can talk about this one winter solstice sunrise chamber. That 270 feet away, there is an equinox-oriented chamber, but it is literally on the side of a steep hill. And I'm looking at this. How is a farmer supposed to pull his wagon full of, crops to store? Why did he put it on the side of the hill? You can't pull a cart in front of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. What was the other thing we visited that was it that they thought it was a kiln?
Yes. That was definitely way up on a mountain.
Yeah, that one was way up there. That's right.
And
it was supposed to be a lime kiln or something?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what they thought. It had a small opening in the bottom.
Right.
On the front, on the downhill side. And there's like a natural spring up the hill a little ways. But
and it was a big structure.
Yeah,
too.
It was very big, and there was really huge stones in there. That one's. The problem is that they cleared the area around it, and I don't know if that contributed to this problem, but a big storm came through, and there was a tree that had grown on top of it, and it fell down, and the roots.
Yeah, wasn't that Sandy? Didn't that happen in Hurricane Sandy?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, so they cleared the area, and then, there was a big tree on top, and then a storm comes through. I think it was Hurricane Sandy. It was real windy, and it blew that tree down, which, of course, the roots come up, and it pulled down half the structure. Yeah.
So
they didn't mean to do that,
it.
obviously, but yeah, it was. Now they want to rebuild it. But yeah, it was a beautiful structure. Still is, the part of it that's still standing. But we were talking to people, and they think, it was a lime thing. So we're talking a recent structure, but Kyle and I were just like, I'm not sure. Of course, I don't know enough about
that industry at that time.
Yeah.
Right.
But I would say
what was nearby, and
nothing.
I would assume.
Yeah.
I would assume you need wood to burn the lime kiln, or do you need coal? I know, but whatever it is, do you want to carry heavy things up the hill to this?
Right.
I don't see farmers and colonists trying to make their lives more difficult.
Exactly. That's right. So what do you think? What's your idea? You started to go look at these places, and what ideas began to develop, and what's your prognosis?
My prognosis. Well, initially, everyone who's telling me these stories is saying it's Celtic monks, it's Vikings, it's this or that, which makes great stories, but there just wasn't any supporting evidence. Civilizations who use metals would leave artifacts behind, and there just weren't any. What were in these areas were stone points and pottery and all sorts of signs of Native Americans who've probably lived in this area for 11,000 years.
Right.
So I get a lot of people upset when I think these are probably most likely Native American. We have two very staunch schools of thought for the most part. Those who say they're absolutely nothing of significance. They're all colonial, and those who think they have to be of Europe, some sort of pre-Columbian European construction. And I'm kind of often the lone voice in the wilderness here saying, hey, how about the Native Americans? How about the people who lived here and had the manpower and had the reason to build astronomically aligned calendar sites? I mean, I had a local historian when I was doing some research. He looked at me, strange, and he's like, well, why did Native Americans need to know what time of year it was? And I looked at him stunned. I said, for survival?
Yeah.
So that's what we're up against in this area of the country.
Yeah.
I just have to call it stunning ignorance.
But there's precedent for the Native American cultures building astronomically aligned structures.
Definitely.
And I don't know what precedent there is for the colonists building them. Obviously, from people that came from Europe would have seen ancient structures that were astronomically aligned, and maybe there were some that were built by colonists that appreciated that type of stuff. But it's pretty clear that whoever lived here before, these cultures that go back thousands of years, built stuff like that. So it is strange that they're attributed to.
Yeah, like the Chacoans, right? They have plenty of the Pueblo people. A lot of their structures are aligned to various astronomical things, and some of them are very subtle astronomical things. It isn't just equinoxes and solstices. So it's very clear that there were plenty of people in the Americas long before any Europeans supposedly arrived here that paid a lot of attention to the sky and built structures that contained the knowledge that they had gathered from their observations of the sky. At least that's what it appears to be. Now, the question would be for me, I guess, is why I wouldn't be asking, like, why would they need to know, about times of year? Because I think, in my opinion, these structures are actually, you don't need to build structures like this to know when to plant crops or when to move around. I think they were doing it for something deeper. Do you think that as well?
That's certainly possible. But on the surface of it, clearly, knowing New York weather for many decades now, you can be really fooled by a very warm fall. And then all of a sudden, bam, it's snowing. So I think the basic calendar sites were definitely essential, and then there's the winters that don't seem like they're ever going to end. So knowing how much longer you have to probably, survive on what you saved for the winter, basic things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but clearly they had the Native Americans and just about every indigenous people have these deep-seated spiritual beliefs that were tied to the sky.
Right.
And we see this around the world, the legends that their gods come from the sky, their superheroes come from the sky. The shapes that the stars make are part of their legends and heritage. So observatories would just have been a part of everyday life.
Yes, I agree with that. And it's interesting that they would choose to build these structures out of stone. Do you think that there are other structures that they built out of stone also that they used for housing, or just these kinds of astronomical things?
There's no sign of any type of housing in this area,
right? At
least. So whatever these were very special structures.
Okay.
But I want to go back to something you said, that that sometimes these sites are subtle, and people say, "Oh, archeo-astronomy, it's so so involved. I said, you basically need a stone and the horizon. And that's it. You can use a stick. And, it's so simple. And people were so tied in to the night sky that putting a few rocks in a line to show where winter solstice, sunrise or sunset, or the equinox is, little kids should have been able to do that.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I wonder about too is you don't have to go to great lengths to build a chamber to mark the equinox or the solstice. That's why these things are somewhat of an enigma,
Right. Because
And the other thing is we've learned this from attempting to set markers ourselves on specific days or whatever, that you never really know if you're going to be able to see the sun.
Oh, please tell me about it. The miles I have hiked only to watch the clouds roll in.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I'm glad it's not just here. I was beginning to take it personally.
Yeah, and we have a big sky here in Texas.
That's right. Texas has a really big sky.
Yes, better than here for sure. So, right, you're not going to move tons of rock until you are absolutely sure that's the alignment you want. I would think you would build something in wood first.
Yes.
At least for a couple of seasons to say, all right, that's where we want it. And then you start moving stones.
Right. Do you think, so one of the things we were looking at that was interesting to us at the sites we went to is that these chambers were often surrounded by very tall, land features, the geography around it. So when it's targeting like a solstice or an equinox sunrise, is it targeting it at the point where it rises above the distant mountain, or are they trying to actually point it at a horizon that they can't see?
That's an interesting point. For the most part, what I have seen is that they are visual.
Okay.
So Vermont, I know, is a little hillier, but a lot of times I would think, of course, there's always all these trees to deal with. I would think, well, there's no way you're going to see this, but I always say, boots on the ground, go and see these sites in person. And sure enough, there may be a little crack, a small depression between two peaks where that sun peaks up, and you're like, bingo, they knew exactly what they were doing.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah, we had talked about these sites we went and visited in Vermont recently, and my uncle lives up there. And after we did that show, he called me and was saying that the trees there that we were wondering about, I was like, you can't even see through these trees. And he's like, well, they're apparently those mountains used to be bare up there in Vermont. So all of that stuff is very recent.
Right.
Yeah, and there's ample evidence of Native Americans clear cutting certain areas, burning them.
Yep.
They managed the landscape quite well.
Yeah, we learned that about the Puebloan culture in Colorado, that they, like out there at Chimney Rock, they clear cut the whole place.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, and those are huge, what are they, ponderosa pines? Is that what they were called? Yeah, they were enormous trees, and these guys were obviously logging them and using them for construction, moving them sometimes miles and miles, these gigantic logs.
Wow.
So yes, we are full. And what going back to that again, I was thinking specifically of one of their structures, and so what I was saying subtle, because the subtle thing that they were looking at was that, what is it, that 18-year cycle of the moon?
That's right.
Where it moves
the
like
18.6 lunar.
Yes.
Yes.
The
cycles.
maximum rise and minimum rise and
Yeah.
set, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty subtle. I mean, I agree with you, though, that people who are more connected to the night sky would notice those kinds of things, especially if they're paying attention. You're using some land feature that's off in the distance, and you're standing in the same spot, and you do it for decades, you're going to notice these movements back and forth, even if they're only a few degrees.
Right.
And that actually suggests that they weren't nomadic, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to kind of stay in the same spot.
You got to be in the same spot to notice.
Yes,
that type of stuff.
how many years do you need to be in the same spot to notice an 18.6 year cycle?
Yeah.
I guess by oral tradition they passed on that knowledge, or maybe they had some form of writing on bark that we've lost.
Yeah.
But to mention the 18.6 year cycle, there's a site overlooking the Delaware River that it's called Lifting Rocks. And it's not just one perched boulder, large boulders with supporting stones under them, but it's several of them and some other interesting features. And years ago, back in the 70s, there was a local archaeology group, and they studied this site, and they thought that one of the lines of boulders was pointing to I think it was lunar maximum sunset and set. And I'm looking at these and I'm like, all right, it goes pretty far off. I said, for an 18.6 year cycle, they really should have a few more stones in line. So I had one person stand on one of the stones, another one on the other, and I just kept following the line out. And I'm walking, and all of a sudden, completely different from the rest of the landscape, was this huge rounded rock of white quartz.
Wow.
And I'm looking at that, and it's like I had to pinch myself. It's like, and I kept checking back and forth and taking measurements. And what better way to mark a lunar alignment than with this massive dome? It was basically a big dome of white quartz. And,
wow.
I did my little archeo-astronomy dance there. Basically entails jumping up and down like a little kid.
I have definitely done that dance.
Yeah, that's the importance of going to these sites.
Yeah.
And I've seen it at other sites where you're looking for one thing and you find something else because you realize that equinox sunrise is casting a very curious shadow on that rock over there. And so you go running over and you're like, oh, so you really need to experience these places firsthand.
Awesome. I'm super jealous.
Yeah.
Well, you have some sites out there to examine.
That's true.
We do. So, what about the quartz? Have you noticed that in other places? Because we also noticed large quartz boulders that were seemed to be placed in prominent spots in some of the sites that we visited.
Yeah, either that was the largest piece of quartz I've found. Sometimes you will find walls with single pieces of quartz, but there's a place called High Point, New Jersey, which, not surprisingly, is the highest point in New Jersey. And they have a series of boulders, large boulders, that if you stand behind them and look at this, they call it the little saddle notch between two hills on the other side of this lake, you get the solstice, winter, summer, and then the equinox sunrises. And the one for equinox, I believe it is a large kind of semi-pointed rock. And in the center of it is this beautiful white vein of quartz that goes right to the point.
Wow.
So again, if you are whoever built this walking through the woods and you see this little monolith with this line, basically a street sign marking, stand here and look at this.
Yeah.
And there was another site at the Ramapo Walls where it clearly looked like someone had leveled off the side of one of these rocks with beautiful veins of quartz in it. and that is a summer solstice sunrise alignment. So they clearly saw something special in the white quartz.
Right. Wow, that line in the middle also has, I don't know, I was just thinking it's symbolic as well, because the equinox is, that's the middle of the year. It divides it right in half of, with the winter on one side and the summer on the other.
I never looked at it that way. That's brilliant. I'm sure that's why they chose it, the halfway point.
Yes. That is really cool.
I'm giving you an applause there.
All right.
Very good say, yes.
See, that's what I love about when I do these presentations on this. People see things that, you can stand and look at something for years, and then the stranger comes along and says, well, didn't you notice this?
Yeah. You're like, no.
Excellent.
Yeah, that both of those descriptions were amazing. So, so again, I want to go back to the construction part. These are harder questions, but how do you think that you're talking about these balanced rocks? Do you think that they did those? I mean, I know that the standard model basically says that these are erratics, right?
Well, yes, they are glacial erratics, but I think most of them are manipulated.
Yes, placed.
Moved and or manipulated. Some of them are so enormous. Like there's one in Kittatinny, New Jersey. It's huge. I don't remember how many tons it is. Let's say 120 tons. I can't picture someone moving this on the top of a mountain. But yet, if you look on the side, along the rim, the ridge on top, someone had chiseled a little crest, almost like the point of a wave. And if you are to stand behind that rock at winter solstice sunset, the sun sets in the crest, right on the tip of that crest.
Whoa.
So there's also one of my favorite sites, Lake Tiarati, which is a nice Indian name. There is a huge, huge pointed boulder, which I believe, and it's kind of perched on an incline. And something that heavy during all the freeze thawing, of the winter, I'm surprised it hasn't actually slid off of this perch. But I thought by the map I had that it pointed directly at winter solstice sunset. And my third attempt at seeing it, because of clouds, I'm looking and I'm like, no, the point is aimed too far west. And I was so convinced, because there's multiple alignments on this hilltop with other boulders. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it just slipped. But I'm like, well, why wouldn't they have tried to move it? And then as the sun's setting, my husband was with me, and I turned away from the rock. I'm so upset that it's not going to point where I wanted it to. And he said, just turn around. I'm like, why should I turn around? It's too far west. I know what I'm talking about. He goes, just turn around. And I turn around, and the top ridge of this massive rock, it's on the cover of my book, has this indentation curved in it, and this giant orange ball of the setting winter solstice sunset is cradled in that so perfectly. I'm covered in goosebumps right now, even relaying that moment. It literally took my breath away. I'm like, that's it. That's what people stood here and watched for how many hundreds of years, possibly. When you I don't want to sound kind of weird here, but when you make that connection, when you stand somewhere where ancient people stood and observed something so important to them, it really does make an impression.
It does.
I bet it does, yeah.
And we're all about weird here, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
And we have talked many times. Kyle and I love to look for arrowheads, just to say. So we know the feeling of you pick up an arrowhead and you're like, how long has it been since the last person held this? You know, and you're looking at something that's 9,000 years old and you're holding it in your hand.
Wow.
It's very intense.
Yeah.
Now I haven't had any effect like what you just said, because that's like a discovery at the same time. But are what you describing there is that you're saying that, okay, so the boulder pointed the wrong direction, but they carved something into the top of it to make.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow.
I'm still not discounting the fact that perhaps 500 or 1,000 years ago, I mean, we're only talking a couple of degrees, that the point, it is almost an arrowhead shaped boulder, and that it's perched on, of course, some small stones in the corners. Could one of those stones broken and it shifted? Could, again, freeze thaw and it's tilted slightly? My archeo-astronomy spidey sense tells me that it used to point more directly at it, and when it slipped out of alignment, and I'm like, well, now what are we going to do? We can't move this thing.
Yeah.
But you can carve a depression in the back to match up with it.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
I can't even imagine how they balanced them on those. I've seen pictures of these things, and I'm just, it is, if somebody did that, you know, they go along, they find themselves a gigantic erratic boulder that was dropped there by the ice or something. And then they're like, all right, let's lift it up off the ground and balance it on these other ones. And I mean, that's an amazing feat of ingenuity and engineering.
It is. And it takes more than a handful of Celtic monks.
That's right.
I'm sorry, but it's going to take a long time and a lot of muscle power. I think the most dramatic is the balanced rock in North Salem, New York. And that one, if you turn over, if you have my book there and you look at the back cover, that's a pretty decent picture of it. It's a 90-ton granite boulder that the glaciers brought from New Hampshire. And the conventional wisdom was that it the glacier gently perched it on these conically shaped limestone supports. Now, limestone on the Mohs scale is 3.
Right.
So I think the glacier would have ground them to dust. The glaciers don't tend to delicately carve support stones and then drop a 90-ton granite boulder on top. And it's just how they did that, I have no idea, unless it was perched up higher and maybe they started digging under it and putting the support stones.
Right.
Or they completely excavated, or they had some technology that, you know, of pulleys or levers. I don't know. But for critics who still say, no, the glaciers had to do that. Well, apparently the glaciers made an almost identical balanced rock, because about 90 miles almost due north, there's another one with the same conical supports with a similar shaped massive boulder perched on top.
Wow.
So these were some very clever glaciers that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Smart glaciers.
Yes.
Yeah, we're looking at the picture of it right now. It is amazing. And I wonder if it's got an effigy.
Yeah, I see faces.
There's faces.
I see
a lot of people see like a lion or a puma.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. A puma looking left and a bird looking right.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that. Now, I never thought, you guys are really on top of it tonight. Nobody's ever mentioned the bird looking right, but I see that rounded almost eye there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which makes the ear of the puma sort of.
Right.
But this is I remember Graham talking about this, Graham Hancock talking about how, like at Göbekli Tepe, for example, they used like one animal was also parts of another animal.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, this is This is
Oh,
something that's been done for a long time.
Yeah.
right.
So that's, I don't know, that's
Artists.
immediately what I saw.
Artists, man.
Yes.
They're always doing this kind of they're trickery.
Yeah. MC Escher, that's where he got it
That's
from.
right. But yeah, looking at this picture, and I'll put this in the show notes for people to see, and people should just buy the book because it's on the back of the book. But yes, looking at the picture, that's, I just can't buy that a glacier dropped it like that. I mean, in Europe, they would consider this to be an artifact, not right. They have
Yes.
things. Yeah, that's what's weird about it. In Europe, they have things like this, balanced rocks, and they are considered to be constructed.
Now, in, I believe it was 1824, a British geologist by the name of Finch came to this country and he was blown away. He was basically like, why aren't you Americans paying more attention to this? This is the most remarkable ancient edifice you have in this country that I've seen. He had no doubt it was man-made. And of course, being a geologist, he said, no, limestone does not occur in conical shapes. It's very blocky.
Yes.
You would have to carve it, and certainly granite and limestone would not mix in in this fashion in a glacier. So he was trying to tell people in the 1820s. Of course, he thought they were Celtic. He said these look exactly like what I see in my homeland.
Right.
And basically, come on, America, wake up, look what you have here. And here we are 100 years later, and it's still like banging your head against a brick wall. Nobody in the archaeology, geology community in this area wants to listen.
That's right.
That's really strange.
Yeah. We went to look. So in one of the areas we went in Vermont, a forestry service guy came out to kind of show, because my uncle got a hold of him and told him that we were going to look at this site, and it was in a forestry, what was it, like state forest area. Mm-hmm. And so he came out and he was showing us around, and that's what he said too. He thought it was the farmer that owned the land, Smith, and he was like, I think Smith was just what did he call him, a neatnik?
Yeah.
Because Kyle and I were arguing. We're like, come on, man. Farmers that are moving rocks out of their fields don't make these beautifully constructed cairns. They just pile the rocks up in piles.
Right.
And he was like, well, I think Smith was a bit of a neatnik, right? Like, that's what he called him.
One of the strange things about that site, though, is that the cairns are so closely packed together that essentially you've crowded your farming field,
right,
as opposed to clearing it out.
Yeah,
you just go from one to the other, and when you're plowing a field, straight rows are very helpful.
That's
to
right.
the process, and you couldn't do that here. There's so many piles of stone,
and they're enormous. Some of them are very large. So it was it was whoever did it moved a lot of stone, and in some areas they are packed together. And they have they're just beautifully constructed. Mm-hmm. It's all dry laid, but who knows how old they are, and they're still mostly intact. It's just absolutely fascinating. And of course, Kyle and I are like, are they hollow? Do they have chambers on the inside? And you can't dig in them or anything, but man, some of them look like they have interiors. That's
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, archaeologists should be all over these things.
That's right.
And they're not. They travel the world looking for ancient structures, and they probably drive right by these on their way to the airport.
Oh, man. I can't imagine why. It's like, again, I guess going back to the Native American culture, I don't understand why there's a resistance to them having built these things. Because like we were saying earlier, they have built, look at Cahokia. That was an enormous,
I love Cahokia, yes.
So why would they look at we know something like Cahokia existed, and then we have these beautifully built but small chambers in the Northeast, and they're like, no, these are colonial. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I think this goes way back to pilgrims arriving and I know there's the story of they find this village, Indian village, where all the Native Americans are gone because of smallpox.
Oh yeah.
But they saw this as this divine gift that, look, we have all of this here for us because we deserve all of this. And when you're systematically eliminating an entire population, you don't want to think that they were clever enough to build these structures, and they had complex societies and ceremony, and I'm sure Glenn probably mentioned this on his show, that anything Native American they called the devil, was the work of the devil.
Yeah, he did mention that. Yes.
Right. So when you're literally trying to demonize and eradicate a group of people, you don't want to say, wow, they were building these beautiful things, or look at this complex observatory they had. You want to say, no, they're savages, we're getting rid of them. And that puritanical mindset, I think, has just hung on here in the Northeast. That's the only thing I can think of, because everywhere else, they were making, either in wood or stone or earth, they were making these calendar sites.
Yeah. And it's interesting that something like that would hang on. I don't discount what you're saying, but, when you look at the academic community, they do seem to want to fight against exactly that kind of thinking. So it's strange that it would hold on in this instance.
I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah.
To give you one example, I have been trying to get geologists and archaeologists to come to these sites, and one from a university, a rather large university in this area, condescended to look at some of my work. So I sent a couple of pictures, and, well, this is an equinox alignment, this is that. And he responds to me, says, well, Linda, the glaciers had big rocks that fell out of them.
Oh, God.
And so it looks odd, but it's perfectly natural. And he also then went on to say, and you can't just run around the woods taking pictures of the sun behind rocks, because you need 2 points to make a line.
Yeah. God.
Well, steam was coming out of my ears. So I politely wrote back to him that, yes, I know about big rocks falling out of glaciers, because I used to lecture on the effects of the glaciers in the Hudson Valley. And I said, I have hiked to the top of mountains to find the glacial chatter marks, because I think that's cool. And I also pointed out that I used to teach astronomy, so I do grasp the 2 points for a line.
Yeah.
But at that point, I was like, it's not worth it, because they don't want to hear it, and they're going to belittle whatever you found. And I mean, I don't think I've ever been treated with such disrespect in my life. And all I'm trying to do is bring awareness of stone sites with astronomical alignments.
Yeah, it's very condescending. I'm glad you told him what for, though.
Yes, politely.
Yeah, very politely. But okay, but hold on a second now. You piqued my interest on something. What glacial chatter marks? We're also very fascinated by geology, so I think I know what you're talking about, but tell us what that is.
Oh, they are these crescent-shaped marks. If you go to the top of mountains where glaciers passed over, often you will find this series of semicircular, like I said, crescent marks, all in a line, which look like, wow, these are some amazing ancient petroglyphs, but it's actually caused by rocks in the glaciers, and the force of it pressing down on the rock carves these patterns. So if you Google chatter marks, you will you will see. And I can see where people were thinking that they had to be man-made because they're so distinct. And when you see them all in a line, you're certain, wow, this was an ancient civilization that carved this.
Yeah. Okay. So we're pulling up some pictures now. Yeah. They do look carved.
Right?
Wow. All right. We'll put these in the show notes. Some of these in the show notes for people to look at.
Yeah.
That's really
All right, new thing to look for.
New thing to look for. Yeah.
Well, I don't know that the glaciers made it down to Texas.
Well, maybe it's a long time ago.
No, when we travel,
Yeah.
new
Yeah.
thing to
When we
look
travel.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's just a cool thing to know you're standing where a mile of ice once was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is quite amazing to think of that sometimes when we were talking to our uncle. We're like, yeah, so you back then you walk out your front door, you'd have to go a mile straight up before you were on top of the ice. And
Right.
that kind of blows people's minds. That's a lot of ice.
Yes. Yes, it is. And it dropped a lot of big rocks.
On conical limestone smaller rocks.
Yes. Yes. I forgot to mention that.
So, let's see. So the glaciers, then the retreat of the glaciers would necessarily date these, give us the earliest possible date for these structures, right? So
yes.
how old do you think some of them are? I mean, like, what are the ranges? I know that they probably haven't been actually studied and dated, but what do you think?
Well, I have multiple answers to that. I
Excellent.
think the chambers are probably at least 500 years old. I certainly can go back longer. I found what I believe is a Pleiades alignment at this one site called the Ramapo Walls. And by using these solar astronomical calculation programs where you can put in dates, the best alignment for that feature is about the year 1000 to 1500,
Okay.
if that's correct. However, in the Hudson River itself, about 15 years ago, they were doing this long sonar mapping project. It was a $600,000 project, took 18 months. Prestigious scientists from all sorts of universities and really tops in their field. And what they were looking for were signs of pollution, environmental problems. They were finding a lot of dead oyster beds and things like that. But they were charting essentially every square inch, every square foot of the bottom of the Hudson River. And they found a lot of shipwrecks, but there was a little article in the New York Times which just mentioned one paragraph of this article said, oh, and by the way, they found a series of 900-foot parallel stone walls, which had to be at least 3,000 years old because that's the last time that part of the land would have been exposed and not underwater.
Wow.
And I mean,
One paragraph?
what? And so I contacted some of the scientists and they said, well, yes, it created a big stir. I remember the day we discovered this, and I can't tell you where they actually are, but I know it's Newburgh Bay. But so I spoke to 3 project scientists who said, yeah, it's amazing. And I said, well, why hasn't anybody done more work? Oh, we don't know. So then I contacted the DEC to try to get the actual scans.
The DEC?
And the Department of Environmental Conservation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And so they had the original scans. And I figured, well, this is could be a great scientific historic discovery. Why don't you share them? Well, what do you want to know for? I said, because it's of great historical interest. I said, trust me, I'm not trying to salvage shipwrecks. I don't want to see shipwreck data. I just want to see these walls. Well, who told you there were walls?
Ugh.
And I said, well, it was in the New York
Times.
Oh, well, that was an off-the-cuff remark. I was like, oh, really? I talked to 3 of the project scientists. Oh, well. So I finally got this very small, I put them in the book, and you can see the lines of the walls, and then they even have a cutaway where you can see the walls are at different heights, but running parallel for hundreds and hundreds of feet. So who was building stone walls in the Hudson Valley, next to the river, 3,000 or more? They said a minimum of 3,000 years old.
Right, because 3,000 years ago was when it finally went underwater. Is that what they were saying? So they
Right.
had, yeah.
Right.
So they could be much older than that.
They could be 5,000, 10,000, who knows?
Yeah.
But who's looking at them? No one.
Now, are there any parallel walls in areas that are not underwater in that area? Something similar?
Well, we have a site. Well, there are several sites, but there's one site in particular called Indian Hill, and these are massive stone walls that run parallel. To give you an idea, one of the walls is 270 feet long, about 5 or 6 feet high, and at the end is as wide as 24 feet wide.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
You can drive a school bus on this.
Okay.
And again, the historians say it was a farmer clearing his field.
Okay, I've seen. So in one of the places we went in Vermont, there's basically what looked like a wall when you approached it, but then if you climbed up it, it was just huge the whole time. And the other side was not. You couldn't see the stones exposed on the sheer side of it like you could on one side. The other side sort of rounded off to the ground, but this thing was just massive. And I was like, I was trying to figure this out, like what. But that's what that reminded me of, what you said.
Yeah, it's so wide across the top that if you're standing on it, you may not know what it is.
And there on the uphill side of it, I guess maybe over the years is just the erosion or whatever.
Push soil up against it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Until the uphill side is almost completely level with the ground, so you only see it from one side. So it kind of looks like it looks like a retaining wall, right?
Right.
But you can see a gradual rise. But it was just, I'm like trying to figure out, did they build a wall or is this whole thing a structure?
Yeah.
Or did they dig a trench and put a wall on the side? It was just really strange. But yeah, that's it. Wow.
Well, this one particular wall, by using my compass years ago, I said, this should be winter solstice sunset alignment. It could be a winter solstice sunrise, but it's built up against a hill. So it's not the best when you turn that direction.
Oh, right.
Not the best direction. So again, year after year, I was thwarted in my attempts. And just this summer solstice day, hiked out there, stood on, I have, if you go to my Mysterious Hudson Valley Stone Sites Facebook page, I have these dramatic photos again of this beautiful big orange setting sun going right down the middle of this wall.
Wow.
1,000 people could have stood on this wall watching summer solstice sunset. It's I call it Sunset Boulevard now because Solstice Sunset Boulevard. It's just dramatic. And there's an absolutely identical one about 500 feet away, oriented in the same way. So
wow.
not only did a farmer miraculously make one, solstice alignment wall, he made two. It's just absurd. But I do want to bring up something else about this site, and something that's been bothering me since I started this quest on these sites. Two other long, massive walls at Indian Hill are oriented to 353 and 173 degrees. Not quite, north. I was hoping they were true north-south, and I thought, now why would they do that? I found at 4 other sites features that are oriented to 373, 173. I have spoken to rooms full of astronomers, and no one's been able to find out what is the significance of that alignment. So I am throwing it out there to you and your listeners. If anyone has a clue, please get in touch with me.
What are the numbers again?
353, and of course the converse then would be 173. So I have gone through, I'm sure you're familiar with the stellarium program.
Yes.
I have sat in front of the stellarium. Okay, let's go to April 2nd. Let's go to April 3rd. Let's, sunrise, sunset, some people suggested maybe the line of the Milky Way. I don't know. And this kind of freaked me out because I was looking for, I was just putting in these coordinates on a Google search to see if anything else was aligned to that. And what pops up but Göbekli Tepe? And I'm like, no, we can't go there with this. And sure enough, in 1 or 2 of the enclosures, the tall monoliths, the T-shaped ones, are oriented to 353 and 173.
Whoa.
And
it was the maybe the location of where the comet came from.
Maybe there's a periodic comet every 11,000 years. I'll take that. I mean, clearly there's no connection to the builders of these 2 sites, but I thought that was too much of a coincidence. I don't know. I don't know, but I keep finding this.
I want to say that going back to, this topic of who built them and why are they so similar to these structures that are found in Europe. And, that's obviously one of the reasons why some people think that it was ancient Europeans that came over and built them. But we're kind of fans of the idea that there was a lost civilization and lost technology and knowledge that was nevertheless passed down through oral tradition or whatever, and perhaps this lost civilization circumnavigated the globe, and so their influence was worldwide. So thousands of years later, you could have in 2 very distant parts of the world different cultures and different peoples building very similar things, focusing on very similar things, having similar, architecture or construction methods or mythology.
Expressing this ancient lost information.
Yeah, because I do think that there's a lot more to the alignments than just, we need to know when to plant. I understand the utility there, but again, we go back to why did they need to take such monumental undertakings to make this.
Yeah, and you don't need to pay attention to the moon phase. The whole 18.6 that doesn't tell you when to plant anything.
Yeah.
So
no. Clearly, that's when we lump everything into the term ceremonial.
Right.
That's right. And there seems to have been periods of time where lost or new technologies seem to just come out of nowhere, and new building styles pop up everywhere all over the place. So it's like kind of like
there are infusions.
There's this knowledge that's then released to people, and I don't know. It just seems something like that. So maybe it's not connected to
There's
Göbekli
something
Tepe.
deeper going on.
Yeah,
for sure.
Maybe it's not connected to Göbekli Tepe in time, but it could be connected in tradition.
Boy, I would love to be able to prove that.
Oh, yeah.
man, yeah.
But yeah, there's something there. It is not a coincidence. This one site, Ramapo Walls site, which is the most remarkable site I've ever been to. There is one very, very long straight stretch of wall that has this same orientation. And there's one or two other of these orientations on the site. And it's maddening because I don't know when to go to try to confirm an alignment with something because I don't know what it's there for.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe it's because we know that the magnetic pole moves around, so maybe they were pointing at that. But if Göbekli Tepe was also the same alignment, that doesn't make sense because the declination would be different.
Exactly. And could it have something to do with the changing North Stars?
Yeah. Wow, that would really, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it. So I am still trying. But again, if anybody out there has a suggestion, but I'd like to mention this Ramapo Walls site again. It's over 200 acres of not just all manner of walls, but there are 16 stone mounds, all circular, some of them as big as 60 feet in diameter.
Wow.
And again, it was a farmer clearing his field.
Right.
I have found multiple astronomical alignments between features. I mean, we could talk about that all day, but the big thing that blew my archeo-astronomy doors off was it's a big site to get a grasp of. So, when you go there, I'm familiar with it now, but early on it's like, all right, which direction do I go for this and how far? So I was just measuring there. A map had been created back in the late 70s. So from the map, I'm like, okay, there's one little fireplace on the whole site. And from this fireplace pit to this first mound, let me just get okay, it's 471 feet. All right, let me write that down. And I said, well, how about the fireplace to this other mound? And I did my calculations and 471 feet. And I'm thinking, I must have just put in the wrong numbers and did it. And I'm like, no, those are the right. And I think I froze for a moment. And I'm like, no. And so I think I found 36 different measurements on the site that were this 471 feet. So I said, well, let me divide that in half. And I found dozens more of that. And I quickly realized nothing is random at this site. A common unit of measurement, whatever that was used to put every wall, every stone mound. It really was breathtaking that this is just a mathematical and planning masterpiece spread out over 200 acres of astronomical alignments. And there's kind of if you know the lens shape, it's like pointed at each end, kind of an oval pointed at each end.
Yeah, like a vesica. Is that what you mean?
At like a what?
Like a vesica Pisces? Is that what you're talking about? It's like
something like that.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. There, at the northeast corner, there is a very long one, and attached to that are two shorter ones, all in a row. Well, the two shorter ones, the length of the two of them equals the length of the longer one. And the width is also part of that measurement system, and it is pointing exactly on a north-south line. So to me, that's the key to this site. You come to this site for the first time, find that feature, you know where the 4 cardinal points are, and you know the system of measurement because it's expressed in that structure. And maybe I sound like a crazy person, but this site, I'm telling you, I'm going to spend the rest of my life, however long that is, examining this site because I think it is the most remarkable site, certainly in this area, if not one of them in the whole country.
Yeah. Wow. I don't think you sound crazy.
Thank you.
It does sound like principles of sacred geometry, though.
It does.
What you're saying there, like the Vesica Pisces is, you take a compass and you draw a circle, and then you put the needle of the compass on the circumference of that circle, and draw another circle.
And you get the Vesica.
And that where the part where the 2 circles intersect, that whole middle part is the Vesica Pisces.
I see.
It's this oval shape that's pointed on either end.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Now that shape has a bunch of interesting geometry about it. There's other things you can go from that shape and build all kinds of interesting stuff with using these principles of sacred geometry.
Yeah.
I'm not real familiar with it, but I've messed around with it a little bit. But yeah, that's the fact that they would lay something like that out on the ground. I mean, maybe have.
I think you ought to get some, if you haven't done this yet, get some drone photos of it from directly overhead, put it on your computer and start drawing circles and see what you get.
Yeah, circles with the same, radius, and see where they match up everywhere. You know, you can tell more about.
Yeah, you might find a site plan starting from that.
That'd be so cool.
I mean, there's certainly geometry. I actually did find several examples of the 0.62, the golden ratio.
Oh, yes.
Between some of the features, triangle shapes. It is just absolutely remarkable. And I really need experts, mathematicians, archaeologists to look at this and see what, I'm sure I'm missing a lot and just confirm it. Just, this site, it's on parkland, and all the people in the area use it for driving their quads.
Oh, oh man.
And, when you're using a potential 2,000-year-old stone mound to drive over because it's fun, and I've talked to local historians and nobody's doing anything about it. Yeah, they're not supposed to do that. Well, who's stopping them? You might have really precious artifacts here if you stopped driving over them and maybe did some excavation.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, I think Glenn was talking about that too, that he's trying to get some of these sites preserved, and it's really tough.
Yes. Yeah, they used to have to destroy those stone chambers over in Putnam County if they wanted to build, a 7-Eleven. They would hire an archaeologist to sign a form which was called a site of insignificance.
Ugh.
And, they'd pay him or her, whatever they asked, so they could have an expert say, yes, there's no significance here, you can destroy it. And many of the sites have been destroyed as a result.
Yeah. Wow.
So one other thing I wanted to mention, that some of these chambers and other sites are built on magnetic anomalies.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
And I believe, and I think this is clearly the case, that people used to be much more sensitive to the Earth's magnetic fields. We do have, all these animals who have, it's called magnetoreception.
Mm-hmm.
And how you get that is they have a protein called cryptochromes in their eyes, and they also have magnetite. like birds have it in their beaks. And these are the substances that are sensitive to magnetic fields, how carrier pigeons navigate, how foxes hunt in the snow, you name it. All the animals seem to have it. And guess what? Humans have cryptochromes in their eyes, and they have magnetite in their brains, like whales and dolphins. So we have the substances we need. We have the chemistry to be sensitive to it, but we live indoors surrounded by electromagnetic fields. Some people never step foot in the woods for years. So I think a lot of people have lost that ability, but there are groups like in Australia, I'm going to butcher this name, the Kuuk-Thaayorre Aboriginal group. They have no words for left and right. It's, oh, you have a bug on your southeast leg. Scoot over to the northwest. I want to sit down.
Oh, wow. Because they just know.
That's
They
cool.
just know everything is by direction. And other groups in Polynesia and Mexico and Africa, people living closer to the land, it's the same thing. Oh, I have to, run down to the south and turn to the northeast to, go get lunch. It's just part of their fiber of their being, their ability. So when indigenous peoples in this area were walking along and all of a sudden they felt something strange, they might have thought, oh, this must be a great spiritual spot, when in fact it's probably just, a natural earth magnetic field anomaly. But they had to know there's too many chambers that are built on these magnetic anomalies for it to be a coincidence.
Yeah. I know that some people, Kyle, for instance, is really good at that, but I'm always lost. So I think maybe some people, maybe I don't have very much.
Use your magnet. What's wrong with you?
I don't have any cryptochrome in my eyes. Kyle does, though.
I remember when I was a kid, I just never got lost. I remember saying, well, that feels like north,
Right.
so we should go that way. And I like sleeping with my head to the north.
Right, I've heard that too. Yeah, I've heard that too, that people, that orienting yourself a specific way to the magnetic field to sleep can make people sleep better. It is.
Maybe you need to get some cryptochrome contacts or something.
Maybe, yeah, there we go.
Out there.
And my eyes will just be pointed.
Injections.
I can only look north. Well,
That's really cool. That's funny that we were talking about that last week too, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
And I did not know those things.
Yeah. I also want to point out that Cryptochrome is an excellent band name.
That is a really good band name.
That is pretty cool. The cryptochromes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So also the other thing I was going to point out is, the Earth's magnetic field right now is fairly weak relative to what it seems to have been in the past. So it's possible also that, if there was a much stronger magnetic field, like 10 times as strong as it is now, sometime in the past, then those magnetic anomalies would also be much more powerful.
Absolutely.
Now, we did an experiment a while back. This is,
That's true.
This is anecdotal, but I had this really strong neodymium bar magnet, and I had just a piece of steel, a bar of steel that was
Same way.
almost exactly the same size, and you couldn't really. They were smooth. They felt the same.
Okay.
But when I held them, I was like, the magnet feels different. And so I wasn't sure if I was just, because I knew it was a magnet. So Russ had never seen these things, and I had just gotten the magnets in the mail. And so he came down and I was like, close your eyes. And I gave him the piece of steel in one hand, and I gave him the magnet in the other hand, and I'm like, what's the difference? And he's sitting there holding them, and he's like, this one over here feels different. Weird. And it was the magnet. So I don't know.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
I have some of those magnets. I'm going to have to try that.
yeah. You just got to get yourself a piece of metal that is the same weight and shape and it feels very close, and then try it on people and see if they can tell.
Now, the thing I was worried about is that he would hold his hands too close together, and then they would, because that magnet was very powerful.
Yeah, it would hurt.
And then you'd be conjoined.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. But yeah, we do. I think we have a sense of that, and it's like you're saying, we are surrounded by electromagnetic fields. That may be part of it.
We have iron in our blood, so a strong magnet should affect that in some way.
Yeah.
Well, scientists have finally admitted there's recent studies, just I believe in the last few months, where they did say, yes, the human brain is responsive to magnetic fields.
Yeah.
But they immediately, in the next breath, will say, but that doesn't mean they have magnetoreception.
Yeah. And there have been types of therapy that are magnets. You put them these patches and types of things. There's been some interesting therapeutics type of things involving magnets and magnetism, and people think it's BS.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Magnets are interesting.
Just, they feel, you walk into a room or a place you've never been, you're like, well, this feels nice. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
So I think they're receptive to it. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Oumuamua site in Connecticut.
No, I haven't.
Oh, absolutely. Oumuamua. You have to go there. There's an equinox chamber there. But there's a cliff, a wall, where there's a very unusual, strong electromagnetic field. And people who knew nothing about the site will walk by and start crying.
Wow.
Or have some other strong emotional response. I think they call it the wall of the cliff of tears or something like that, because it's something about the Earth's field there that's messing with our biology.
Huh.
And so I think that's why a lot of these sites were placed where they were. I think America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire is like that as well. So that's my theory. I can't prove it. I'm still fighting for the mainstream to say, yes, Native Americans were capable of pushing two rocks in a line for winter solstice sunrise.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you need two rocks to make a line.
Thank you, Wade. Let me make a note of that.
Okay, so I have one more question on the topic of these sites, and then I think we're getting up at the end here, so we can move on to maybe some UFO stories.
Some good UFO stories. Yeah.
What I want to know is, what is your protocol, and what do you suggest to people who want to go look at these sites? How do they go about finding them, getting permission if necessary? What are your methods?
Well, a lot of these sites are on parkland. Some parks you need to get permits, but those are free. In the book, I tell you how to get there, give you coordinates, because the Ramapo walls, I think it took me 6 attempts to finally find it, because those who knew didn't want to tell anybody. And I think you're walking a fine line there between worried about vandalism and keeping them so secret they get destroyed.
Right.
So, there's places to go to look, like not just my book, but like NERA might have some directions, or local historical societies. Bring your compasses, bring the SunCalc app is fabulous. If you guys haven't used that, I suggest you download it immediately.
Okay.
Going to do it.
Yeah.
You can aim it at a wall or a stone or something, and it will show you where the sun sets and rises for the first day of spring, fall, summer, winter. It's remarkable.
That's
I
great.
wish I had this years ago.
I love nerds. Thank you, nerds.
Yes, absolutely. And take photos, and by all means, absolutely be there on the equinoxes and solstices, because you will discover things you never imagined by the light that's, the shadows that are cast and the angles of light. Experience these things firsthand. Just don't read about them or look at them online. Stand where ancient people stood hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. It's a remarkable connection everyone should experience.
That's awesome. Have you had to approach any private landowners? And if so, how did you?
That usually doesn't go well.
Didn't find success there, huh?
I have written letters and placed calls to some sites which shall remain nameless.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they start to panic, thinking they might have something of value on their land that,
Yes.
the officials are going to step in and,
Right.
declare it's a historic site.
Yeah, we run into that here too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But on the other hand, there was a site where there's this remarkable half-moon shaped rocking stone. I mean, it is huge. It's like a Volkswagen Beetle upside down. And for decades, this was lost. No one knew where it was. And one day I get a call from, I put the word out there. I am looking for this. I know the town, but there's housing developments in the area. So I was afraid it was knocked down. But I get a call. Yes, it's in Mr. Smith's backyard. And he said, you can come and look at it. And
wow.
It was like rediscovering Stonehenge. It exists. And sure enough, as small as I am, I could stand there and push on it and rock this enormous rock.
Wow, man, that's cool.
Yeah. So,
Notification. I am looking for a giant rock in the woods.
Yes.
Sounds exactly like something we would do.
That's right. Cradle of Giants. That's what that sounds like.
That is cool.
It is remarkable. So I think I need to update this book because I've confirmed a lot of my suspected alignments since the book came out and found a few more sites. And again, strap on, tie on your hiking boots and get out in the woods and see what you can discover, because these things are still out there.
Do you take people on tours or anything? Because we do have listeners that live in the area. They might want to.
I have been asked numerous times to do that. I would certainly consider it. I'm just worried about a big group, running amok at these sites.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have taken a few individuals who are seriously interested. And I, at the very least, I can certainly tell you where to park, where to hike, what
Right.
to look for. So I want people to see these sites, because the more people are familiar with them, the less apt they are to be destroyed.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that the people that we know, our listeners that are interested in this, they're very respectful of the site. So if any of them do end up trying to get a hold of you for advice or whatever, it would be cool if you went with them, because these guys, we have a chat room, and some of these guys are posting pictures in the chats every day of some of the stuff. They're hiking out to look at these things all the time. And they are
well, then I would definitely, I'd
Yeah.
be happy to show them these sites.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's really great. I have never heard of this rocking stone. That's really interesting.
Yeah, nobody was looking for it anymore. They just assumed it was lost, but I am persistent.
Yeah.
And
Challenge accepted.
yes.
All right. So you have also written a couple of, you said 3 other books on various UFO sightings in the Hudson Valley. Is that right?
Yes, as I said, I gravitate to all things weird.
Yes.
And I would be giving a lecture on local history, and afterwards somebody'd come up and tell me their UFO story. I'd be like, why are you telling me this? You really need to look into this. And, after about 15 years of hearing these stories, I said, I just have to do something. And so there was one little article in a small newspaper that came out that author looking for UFO witnesses, and the dam broke.
Oh, man.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, because here in the Hudson Valley, there have been sightings going back at least 100 years.
Yeah.
And so it's remarkable. And I hate to tie in the stone sites to this, but actually there'd been a lot of sightings in the 1980s. We had a big wave of these massive triangles, and a lot of them were over these stone chambers.
That was the first thing that came to mind, was like, you said it went back 100 years. Well, why not 3,000 or 5,000?
Yeah.
Oh, probably, but I'm working on it. I just spoke to some 80-year-old man 2 weeks ago who remembered being on his grandparents' farm, and they were seeing craft and lights hovering and moving around their fields in the 1890s.
Wow.
So it's just a matter of finding the information. I'm sure it's been going back a long time, but I think the connection to these stone sites, again, is it something about the Earth's magnetic field, because strange lights are often seen around, fault lines and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were talking about sounding like a crazy person. Here's a crazy person idea. They built the sites where they saw the UFOs, and the walls are following the path that the craft took.
Oh, now you're just talking crazy. That is certainly possible.
Yeah.
373 degrees.
There you go.
So let's hear some of the stories that you've been told. What are the ones that you think are the most interesting?
Well, I think some of the most interesting are the ones where craft the size of 1 or 2 football fields is hovering silently over your head at treetop level for 20 minutes.
Oof.
And that was a common occurrence. That didn't happen once. This happened to thousands of people from about 1983 to 87-ish or so. It is just remarkable. When you see something unusual for 4 or 5 seconds, it can change your life. And these people were standing under these things. I've had people say, it was so close, I could have hit it with a baseball. I could have hit it with a rock. Everybody, if I just had a tennis ball, I could have hit it. And before that, we had generations seeing the classic saucer-shaped craft. Now, and I'd say the last 8 years or so, there's a lot of giant rectangles. Again, enormous, silent, hovering very, very low. We really have run the gamut of all shapes and sizes. And the wave of 1909 was remarkable, because if you know anything about aviation history, no planes were flying yet at night. And yet they're seeing these craft with massive searchlights that could hover, go extremely fast. And they were seen all up and down the East Coast and even stretched up into Canada.
Wow. So would some of these be classed as what they call the airship sightings?
Yes, they were calling them mysterious airships because they didn't know what else to call them.
Right. Flying saucers hadn't been coined yet. That's right.
Right. And an important point also is that, a lot of people say today they're dismissing it as mass hysteria. Now, I have poured through newspaper articles and stories, and no one was hysterical about it. They were excited because they thought the Wright brothers or Thomas Edison, who worked in this area, had invented this amazing airship that could fly at night and carry big, heavy lights. No one ever thought they were little green men or men from Mars. The that was never entertained. They thought it was amazing technological discovery. It just wasn't ours.
Yeah, that is interesting. That's a great point. That the hysteria is usually, you're assuming they mean that these people were running around like, oh my God, the aliens are invading. But no, they're just they thought it was ours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not a single word. And trust me, I've gone through dozens, if not hundreds, of newspaper articles on this, and they're very excited to see what brilliant inventor has come up with this, remarkable feat here.
Wow. I wish it was like that now. That is definitely not what happens now. People see these things and they don't assume that some brilliant inventor has done it. It's a much more sinister.
But things are changing, now that the Pentagon is actually saying, okay, we are looking into it now. Yeah. And when fighter pilots in state-of-the-art plane jets are, have craft flying circles around them, and it's coming out slowly.
Yes. Now, I have heard of I think they call it the Hudson Valley flap, don't they? Where people were stopped on the highways watching these enormous craft in the sky.
Exactly. And that went on for about 6 years.
Wow.
And it's remarkable because I'm sure you've heard of the Phoenix Lights,
yes.
which was remarkable, but essentially one night. That was any given night of the week here in the Hudson Valley for 6 years.
Man, it's also reminiscent of the, the Stephenville.
Stephenville Lights.
Yeah, they some of the witnesses from that also said the similar things, like I could have thrown a rock at it. It was so close, yeah, and enormous.
Right. And yet a lot of people, even in ufology, never heard of the wave. They had a great campaign against the disinformation campaign, where the official excuse it was pilots in Cessnas or ultralights flying in formation with Christmas lights on their planes. And so I actually even went up in an ultralight to say, no, ultralights are not silent. They do not hover.
Right.
The only way an ultralight is motionless is because it's crashed because you were trying to hover, make it hover.
Because you were carrying 40 pounds of Christmas lights.
Exactly. But there were pilots trying to fake it, but they really didn't fool anybody. I've interviewed, 200 witnesses who saw the silent triangle, and then they'll say, and then we saw those idiots in the ultralights.
Right. There you go.
Bobbing and weaving and can't keep in formation. So, but I think it was a very effective disinformation campaign, because to this day, 35 years later, people will say, why are you looking into this? It was ultralights.
Yeah. Yeah, it is effective. This similar things happen with I don't necessarily want to connect this to what you're saying, but it just reminds me of like the crop circle stuff.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
All
too.
it takes is one story of somebody faking one, and then that's what they all are. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, it's the swamp gas Venus, weather balloon syndrome.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a Chinese lantern that was, it was disturbed by a bolide or whatever. They have plenty of stories.
Oh yeah, there are excuses where it was a meteor and a weather balloon at the same time.
Right. The meteor was reflecting off the weather balloon and something. Yeah.
That's it.
So, all right, tell us another story. I know you've had people tell you one, so are there ones where you can just tell us the story of what
I have hundreds, but how about I tell you my own story?
There you go.
Yeah.
It was 1979. I was in my fuzzy red bathrobe studying for a test, and I get a call from a friend a couple of towns over. Linda, drop whatever you're doing, run outside. there are these 3 strange lights passed over us and they're headed your way. So run outside, and sure enough, there are these, I saw no structure, but there was like this rounded yellowish white large lights in a V shape, just silently drift, going at probably about 30, 40 miles an hour. So jump in a car with my boyfriend and his friend, and we take off after these things. And long story short, we trace them back to Lake Tiarati. Remember, I mentioned the stone site there.
Yep.
And these lights had separated. They had gone off in different directions. But we went up to Tiarati because there had been a photograph that I saw in a book that someone saw a UFO over there. And I just, again, that spidey sense, let's just go and see. And sure enough, one's coming back from the north, one's coming from the south, one's coming from the east, and they're on this collision course. And we're like, oh my God, they're going to crash into one another. They come together in this blinding blue-green flash, and as one pulsating light land on the top of this mountain. Well, it's at this point that the state trooper pulls up and wonders what a girl in a bathrobe is doing in a car with 2 men in this state park late at night. And so I'm like, just turn around and look. And it was this really like out of Hollywood pulsing green blue light. He turns white as a sheet and he said, get out of here. Just get out of here now.
Whoa.
So we start driving off. He blows by us at about 80 miles an hour. He didn't want to have anything to do with whatever was making, those lights there.
Wow. Man, to get that scared, and I mean, I almost think like he knew something about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this area I've spoken to caretakers of this big state park, and they said it was happening all the time.
Oh. Wow. Yeah, chasing UFOs in a bathrobe. That's a good story.
That is how dedicated I am.
That's right. Very dedicated. Did you bring your towel? That's my only question.
Yeah. Don't forget to bring a towel.
That's right. You got to have a towel.
I'll tell you, I was ready to run up that hill in my slip bathrobe and slippers to see whatever that was.
Oh, man.
And boyfriend's like, I don't think you want to do that.
Right. Yeah, that's how you disappear forever.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Man.
Or fall down and hit your head.
Yeah, you could hurt yourself. Yeah.
There's that too.
Right. I totally understand, though. I also have I kind of want to run towards the weird stuff. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're how often are you going to get an opportunity like that?
Yes. See?
Yep, we have a thing we call the nothing to lose portal philosophy.
That's right.
If a random portal appears next to you and you got nothing to lose, you jump in it immediately.
Jump into it without hesitation.
Because when is that portal going to show up again?
That's right. And you're going to spend the rest of your life going, what if I would have jumped through?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Linda, thank you so much. This has been a real blast. You are a wealth of information. So tell people where they can find you online, how they can get in touch with you, and where they can get your books.
Well, all of my books are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and every ebook format known to mankind. My Facebook page for the stone sites is Mysterious Hudson Valley Stone Sites. And I think every place I spoke about tonight, I have some pictures and additional information on the site there. My website is gotozim.com, gotozim.com. And you can see everything, all the crazy things I write about, from science to zombie novels. So Again, if it's weird, I gravitate towards it.
Zombie novels. That's great.
Yes, I wrote a Hudson Valley zombie apocalypse trilogy.
Oh, man.
That
Yes.
came, just briefly, that came upon, I was with some friends and we were talking about The Walking Dead years ago. And I said, it's about time the Hudson Valley had its own zombie apocalypse. I'm like, wait, it is. So I like having fun as well as being very, very serious with my work.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. So we'll put links in the show notes to your website. And thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a blast.
Thank you. I really appreciate any opportunity to speak about this subject and get more people interested.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
And we are back. Fastest 2 hours in podcasting. And that was a great interview. Oh, man.
Yeah, that was really good.
I just love hearing that, from writers, people into that stuff up there.
Yeah, the researchers.
Like, this is not colonial root sellers.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I wonder what she thinks of the giant stuff, Like Jim says, he started looking into these stone structures and then he starts coming across all the giant reports.
Yep.
I wonder if that's happened to her too and what she would I should have asked. Well, we'll have her on again.
Yeah, for sure. And we gave her information on the sites that we visited in Vermont, and she's very interested. She's definitely going to look into that stuff. So
yeah, that's good.
She's what did she say? She's relentless
yeah,
researcher.
she's relentless, yeah, and she said she's going to be all.
She's going to
over
get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
For us because I'm not very good at that.
We're not relentless. 2 emails and no answer, we stop.
2 voicemails, 2 emails, done.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was
I really
great.
loved her stories of, her Indiana Jones moments when she goes out to these sites and then sees the alignment or experiences it herself. That's really powerful stuff.
That really brought it home to me. Like, you got to go out there.
Yeah.
That's for
and of
sure.
course, that is what we want to do, right? I mean, we like to research these places, but the first thing I always want to do, and I'm like, man, I want to go there.
Yes,
I want to go
agree.
to it.
Agreed. But she's going on specific days.
Yeah.
It's like we've taken the opportunity of when we're going to do family trips and stuff
Yeah.
to go look at stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
We're
not really
which is
dedicated.
great. But
We haven't shown the true dedication to fly up
all
there
right,
for the
so
solstice.
test number 1, we got to go look at this rock wall next door
That's right.
on the solstice.
Yeah. Or at least get out there and survey and map it first. And then try to figure out what alignment it might be on and then go there that day.
Yeah,
That's
we
what she was
still-
saying.
Yeah,
she was
we
doing.
still got to go on the solstice.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, we
and
do.
the equinox.
And we need to get out to Enchanted Rock and
we're just
we're not doing a lot of expeditions right now.
But hey, harvest is over, man.
That's right.
in 7 days, we'll have all that wine out of those vats and into different vats. And 7 days after that, we'll have them out of those vats and into barrels.
Into barrels, and then we can forget about it.
Yeah, and then we
Sort
can
of.
forget about them for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we
Every
have
2
been
weeks.
talking about planning on, doing some more expeditions. We did this like a couple of years ago. Was it that long ago already? Where we were like, let's go on snake expeditions, and we went to McKinney Falls, and we went to trying to look at the
Yeah,
volcano.
that was like
and,
right after we started the podcast.
really? Wow.
So yeah, we're lame.
Yeah. Wow. We're like, well, maybe we saw the volcano. We're done.
But yeah, hearing those stories is definitely a good influencer.
Yes, that's right.
Good motivation.
Good motivation.
So.
And the UFO stuff, man. I loved her, like she ran after the UFO in a freaking bathrobe. That's great. And she got my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference. Bring the towel.
I totally missed that.
Yeah, because, I think it was called, it was like one of the last books in the Hitchhiker's Guide series. He goes off and goes on this enormous adventure all throughout the galaxy with it. He basically gets abducted with a UFO and he's in his bathrobe.
Okay.
So for the entire story, he's in a bathrobe with a towel. So you didn't get it, but she did. She was like, yeah, you got to have your towel.
I guess I just got demoted from my nerd rating. Dang it.
Yeah. I think it was in Mostly Harmless. That's what the name of the book was. Pretty sure. I don't know. I haven't read him in a long time, but yeah. He gets interrupted. He's got his morning coffee and he's in his bathrobe and he goes outside and he ends up getting up on an alien ship and escaping the destruction of the Earth, and he spends the rest of the story in a bathrobe. Because that's what he was wearing.
That's great. If it weren't for that park ranger, she might be on that adventure.
That's right. You're right. She'd be out there in a bathrobe and her slippers exploring the galaxy. But yeah, that was weird. The park ranger turned white.
That immediately reminded me of the missing 411.
Yeah. Yes.
They know.
Yeah.
There's
they
weird
know.
stuff going on out there.
Yeah. You do not want to mess with that. Get out of here right now.
You don't want to be exploring the galaxy right now.
That's right. Leave at top speed. Yeah. So, great stories, great interview. Lots of good information on these sites. I think she's looking at it the right way.
Yep.
We kind of talked to her after the show a bit about LiDAR, and she wants the thermoluminescence. She's like, please, one person, just one person come out here and date one of these sites. And if they're from, if it comes back from 1850, then she's like, I'll shut up. But if it comes back as 2000 BC, then we need to sit down and have a chat.
Yep.
I think that's
and
a good
detailed
point.
LiDAR scans.
Detailed LiDAR scans. And also, what was the mystery that the 357 degrees? Was it 350 something? Kyle wrote it down. I don't know. But she said it in the interview. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys' thoughts are on that.
Oh yeah, was it 357?
I thought it was 3 degrees off of 360. That's how I thought of it.
353.
353, 7 degrees off of 360.
Yeah, I guess I missed the number at the end there. I said, well, maybe I didn't. I don't know. For some reason I was thinking 373, but that's way too far.
Yeah, that's 13 degrees past. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Oh, it's 173 is the other.
173, yeah, that's the antipode.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so excited to hear you guys' ideas on this, and let us know if you think you might know what it is, and maybe we can talk to her about it. Because I couldn't come up with anything.
Me either. I started using the calculator, doing stuff. Nothing. I got nothing.
And it was interesting that she said that some of the T-pillars at Göbekli Tepe have the same orientation. That
is really cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I know
because that's old.
Yeah. So going to the dating, 500 years, 300 years, 500 years, that area.
Yeah.
Okay. I want it to be older.
Yeah.
I have a bias.
And Glenn did say that they did do thermoluminescence dating on at least one site that he knows of, and it was 2,000 years old. So he said it was around 80 BC or something like that, right? So that is older. But another one she dated to I was thinking it was right around the Puebloan culture time. It was like 1000 AD.
Yeah. Yeah. Which would make sense.
Yeah.
There's definitely a distinct, from what I've seen in Vermont, there's a distinct building style.
Yeah.
And you can see there are rock walls that don't have that.
Right.
They don't have it. And then you go to these other sites that are weird and anomalous, and they have it.
Yeah.
And it's recognizable.
Yeah.
So maybe it needs to be compared, with some of this stuff in the West.
Yeah.
Some of their dry laid building styles.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know, the corbelled ceilings she was talking about, these enormous lintel stones. And I mean, the huge dolmen things.
Yeah.
Those are, and like she was saying, this guy comes over here and he's like, hey, why aren't you guys paying attention to these? And that he thought they were Celtic because they're so similar to the things that are seen over there in Europe.
This is weird, but I was thinking when she was talking about the dolmens, we were looking at that picture. One method you could utilize to lift those things is using the weather and water and ice. So if you had a way to contain liquid water, like there's this huge boulder and you dug out a pocket and you lined it with clay and you filled it with water, then when the winter came and it froze, it could lift that thing up. Like if you dug it out like next to the bedrock,
Yeah.
right? And you lined the bedrock underneath it with clay and you made basically a pool under there that filled all the way to the underside of the rock on one side. Then the winter comes and it freezes and it pushes the rock up a little bit. Right? And then you'd have to dig it out and freaking put stuff under there. Hold it up, and you just keep doing that year after year, and you slowly raise this rock up from one end to the other end to the other end to the other end.
Wow.
That was the idea I had.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Pick it up after like 30 years. But hey, they did weird things over long periods of time, so I don't know.
I also like the idea of, it's embedded in the ground. It's actually buried. Right? Because we see the whole thing exposed.
Yep.
So they come along and they start digging out around it. And as they're digging out, they find places to put supports and they keep digging out and they keep putting in supports.
Yep.
And they keep digging it out until it's actually above the ground and the supports are holding it up. That does also seems hard and a dangerous prospect. Like, one mistake and Johnson's down there digging and the boulder's like, But that I don't know if that could be done. I mean, I was trying to envision how you could do this.
Could be done that way.
Yeah.
It's weird that you wouldn't notice that a long time later.
Yeah.
That there were massive excavations done there.
Right. They would have had to excavate everything around it to make it flat.
Yeah. Same deal with the ice idea.
Mm-hmm. Who knows?
No one knows. No one knows.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that.
I sure did.
So you can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Check out the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Go to the encyclopedia or the glossary. Check out the SnakeSkins, which is our merchandise store. There are 3 SnakeSkins available. There are 3 types. There's the regular dark one, then there's the regular light one, and then there's the evolution one. And people are digging the evolution one. I've been seeing people posting pictures of their Evo shirts.
Heck yeah, man. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. And of course, you can join the Pyramid Scheme, which is a scheme to send us straight to pyramids. You can do that through Patreon or PayPal. Give us reviews also in the iTunes store. That really helps the show. And share it wherever you can. Follow us on Twitter @SnakeBros with no vowels. Join the Facebook group. Join the Discord. There's a link to the Discord on the website. And the Discord is run by Jeff. Run and managed, and he does all the work on it. It's really awesome. And he also makes the Library of the Serpent. And I think I said this last show, but he's been working with Tony to update the site. So the new library is looking good.
All right. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. And of course, History Shift, Brandon, he got us in touch with Linda, and he also makes all of our YouTube videos. So follow him on Twitter and on YouTube @History Shift. And check out Pod Doodles. He takes some of our shows and turns them into doodles you can watch him drawing while you listen to the show. And then he just posted a new one. He was doing one of our Human Origins Developments episodes. So they're always really entertaining to watch. So check him out @Pod Doodles. Also, Cosmographia, the podcast we do with Randall Carlson. Check that out. And thanks to Where Did the Road Go, Uncharted X, Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape, Grimerica, Conspiranormal, The 7 Ages Audio Journal, and Skeptico. And all of you listeners out there,
We love you.
we always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
Slackers.
Harvest is over. We can relax.
You can relax.
So, drink a beer.
Time for beers. Brewpaster, where's
Get
our
yourself
beers
a
at?
Brewpaster beer. Been thinking about them.